Okay. I think there are enough videos on YouTube pointing out criticisms of the show, that it, and Disney Plus as a whole, doesn't know what it wants to be, that it's too PG when sat next to its closest comparisons like Glee and Rise Up. The jokes are bad, the lighting is weird, blah blah blah. The show makes for an easy target due to its title alone. Despite these criticisms, however, it was renewed for multiple extra seasons, and I'm here to discuss why people are so attached to the show, or what High School Musical, the series, gets right. But to understand that, we have to go back to the beginning. Well, not that far.
Bad bitch, if she do it, I say so too. Big 40s and a big ass Draco. 3 more millions when you ask how my day go. Put up a phone, not a blueberry Fago. One false move and we straight to the joint shit. 2 small bands just to take you out real quick. 3 more hoes, pull up, I'm fucking shit. That's how it goes. Big bands, I'm coming.
It's just a movie. It's pretend. You're an adult, you should know that.
Although you may think a High School Musical reboot is just another sign of our nostalgia-filled times, it's actually been long overdue. There were always rumors of a High School Musical 4 being in the works, but it never worked out as most of the original actors were ready to move on by the end of the third movie. There was an unofficial fourth movie titled Sharpay's Fabulous Adventure that followed the escapades of the title character trying to get on Broadway after moving to New York City.
Wait, as in Broadway?
Fun fact, in the movie, Sharpay's love interest was played by Austin Butler, who would go on to date Vanessa Hudgens for almost a decade. It was a pretty good movie, but where was Zeke? The black man loses again. There was also going to be a different High School Musical series titled Madison High, which was picked up for a pilot with popular young actors at the time. There's not a lot of information on Madison High out there because the show was canceled and never aired, but the best description I could find was this.
And the show is kind of about all these kids who are, find their way to a high school drama program, which is really neat. They're all from all different walks of life.
It's not completely clear why it wasn't picked up for more episodes, but some theories include G. Hernelius, who was supposed to play a main character, joining the Dog with a Blog cast instead, and Disney needing more family-oriented sitcoms. But it also definitely had something to do with them trying to make Mark Indelicato's character gay in 2008. You probably know him from the Floss song in the High School Musical episode of Sweet Life of Zack and Cody.
Hit it, Louie.
I've got beef between my teeth. It would be boss if I had boss.
There's an entire Disney cinematic universe. The world was not yet ready, and Madison High never saw the light of day, although High School Musical, the series, does borrow pieces from its premise, such as being single camera, having a gay Mexican character, an Asian female lead, and referencing Troy and Gabriella's relationship throughout the show. The biggest difference was that Madison High was going to be set in the same universe as High School Musical. Miss Darbus was even going to be brought on and would reference her previous students at East High. In High School Musical, the series, High School Musical is just a movie that was filmed at their school in Salt Lake City, Utah. Disney is cashing in more than anyone on the nostalgia money, mainly because they own the soundtrack and animation and TV shows and movies to most people's childhoods. Anyone who was raised from the 50s to the late 2000s owes a lot of what they consider to be childhood-defining media to Disney, and Disney knows it. They're churning out live-action remakes, plays, and reboots all over the place, and when they announced the launching of Disney Plus in October of 2019, the streaming platform's original content obviously wouldn't remain unscathed. High School Musical, the series, was also announced in October to little fanfare. Most people wrote it off as another cash grab on Disney's part, citing the lazy title as proof. I'm kind of embarrassed to admit this now, but I was definitely one of those people. It seemed like another soulless reboot that was going to be operating only on nostalgia. I think in a lot of ways, the thing that made people so skeptical of the High School Musical show, and what makes it such an easy target for criticism, the title, was the same thing that allowed it to succeed. It's a show that understands its ridiculousness, that winks at its source material and then takes the chance to build upon a foundation laid by Kenny Ortega and the gang over a decade ago. High School Musical, the series, leans into its own place as a reboot and as something ridiculous immediately. As soon as you read the title, you expect shenanigans and tomfoolery and to be annoyed. And to some degree, you get all of those things, but it lowers your defenses so you don't see the humor and heart that the show has coming. Now, another example of a lazy title helping a show is That 70s Show. When it was being shown to test audiences, they were still workshopping different names for it. So when the teens who were in the test groups referred to it, they would often say That 70s Show instead of whatever other title the producers had put in front of them. This captured the essence of the show perfectly and lowered the audience's defenses. You expected a show about being in the 70s, like jokes about lava lamps and bell bottoms or like fucking Scooby-Doo. I don't know. I was born 2001. And instead, you found characters you loved, teenagers being teenagers, Red being one of the most iconic TV dads of all time.
Will your father and I having intercourse?
Mom! It's more fun than it looks.
And also the most confusing final season on TV ever, but we're going to ignore that. I think to some degree, the deception of these titles is necessary. People only think they want exactly what's on the tin.
No, I don't know what I expected.
But That 70s Show spinoff, aptly named That 80s Show, was actually exactly what its name said it would be, a show about the 80s, as in jokes about leg warmers and big hair and Prince. I don't know. I was born 2001, but no one liked that show. So that's the title out of the way and my defense of the show being named so ridiculously. Now on to how the show broke the reboot curse and did it well.
Oh, Lord. Again. Nothing new, nothing changed, same old shit.
The reboot or nostalgia curse is, in short, when the entire new piece of work or reboot is completely dependent on the source material or decade it's set in as a crutch. For example, some negative reviews of Stranger Things 3 say it fell flat because it relied too much on being set in the 80s as a piece of the plot. The 80s became a character and other characters suffered because of it. Or the Kim Possible movie not explaining things or bothering to flesh out characters because it assumes you already know them. Or the Lion King remake. Sorry, Beyonce. It was everyone else's fault and I love you and please invite me to brunch next year. Please. I'm really sensitive, so I'll cry if you say no. I also think this curse can kind of work in the opposite direction, where a show is so dependent on technology and being set in the modern era that it makes no sense without an intricate understanding of it. A good example of this is Grownish, which I'm planning on making a separate video about later. High School Musical, the series, had the difficult job of breaking the status quo while not going so far the watcher has to assume most of the plot from what they already know of the original High School Musical trilogy. The few times that the original High School Musical couples and tropes are referenced, they're often being turned on their head.
Ryan, right?
I think you'd rather play Sharpay.
That is so fresh.
For example, Gina in the beginning of the series is the mean girl, so she would automatically become Sharpay. However, Gina has moved around her entire life like Gabriella. The difference between a good and bad nostalgia-driven work is simply in how much the work relies on the nostalgia to push it forward and make it seem good. It's obvious why one would stand the test of time and the other wouldn't. When was the last time people discussed Aladdin or Beauty and the Beast or Cinderella or the Snow White movies? They weren't good on their own. Not really. They relied on you already loving the characters before they did anything to earn it in the movie. The High School Musical show makes every character, every plot line, every rise and fall fight for its own place to matter in the arc of this show. Nene frustrates you because you want better for her, not because she's a bad Gabriella. When EJ and Gina have to redeem themselves, they can't simply rely on knowing that we're all in this together is coming at the end and that's just going to make everyone like everyone again. They have to fight for it. They feel like characters of their own, completely separate from their setting and the real-life context of the show, a task that's exceedingly hard when they are literally playing the old characters and East High paraphernalia is everywhere. The kids still manage to feel like real kids, which brings me to my next point.
Today we had a spelling bee, and this bitch took me out the second round because I ain't know how to spell juice. Like, bitch, I'm 6 years old. Does it look like I know how to spell juice?
The show also had the terrifying job of trying to accurately portray the most elusive generation, Gen Z. No one seems to quite understand them fully. In fact, I don't even think we completely understand ourselves, or like maybe we know ourselves too well. It's like
I don't know.
As a member of Gen Z, it kind of makes me cringe to see how people think we are. Often people my age only exist as characters to be made fun of, not as complex humans who may have their own issues. Because older generations feel like Gen Z has everything they could ever want handed to them, it's easier for writers to brush off most of their problems. Gen Z is also the first generation to be raised completely on the internet, as in, we as people are fundamentally shaped by where we spent our time when we were younger. Have you ever had a conversation with someone and known immediately they spent their formative years reblogging aesthetic pictures on Tumblr or laughing at quote-unquote edgy memes on Reddit? Although millennials might be able to relate to some degree, some of the websites that they spent their time on when they were younger don't even exist anymore and haven't existed for most of my life.
You are very old and you need to play your age and not 12. You're an old lady.
It's why they don't understand TikTok or Billie Eilish, or how they can run OK Boomer into the ground. In a lot of ways, Gen Z stands alone. Therefore, it's easy to write them off. But since high school stories aren't going away, more and more writers are forced to face and humanize this mysterious generation. The High School Musical show does it with ease. They capture the lingo, the struggles, the way we use our phones, the way our families look, the way we want to be wanted and loved, the way you can have the entire world at your fingertips and still feel alone. This show does what Glee could not in its later seasons. It captures the experience of being a theater kid without feeling the need to champion them as the most oppressed group in East High's halls, or putting them into unnecessary boxes. For the most part, other people in the school leave the main kids alone. Their parents are supportive. EJ balances sports and theater, and no one bats an eye, which is a direct contradiction to the original High School Musical. The only time anyone says anything kind of rude is Ricky saying he didn't think a theater guy could steal his girlfriend. He is quickly proven wrong. And Mr. Mazzara being salty because a lot of robotics kids are leaving his club to join theater. It has original music that doesn't suck, which is something Glee could never do.
If I could go back and change the past, be a little braver than I had, and bet against the odds, would I still be lost?
And decisions and characters that feel real. I think for all of that, it deserves some credit. One of my favorite plot lines is that of Ricky's and his parents, specifically the fraught relationship with his mother. At any time, he can pick up the phone and call her, but he doesn't. He doesn't know how to operate in this new world where his parents are no longer together and his mother is no longer coming home to them at the end of the day. Joshua Bassett puts on a great performance of loneliness and self-isolation without making it too heavy or coming across too fake deep. Ricky is frustrating and he emotionally relapses, but he's relatable. His refusal to grow up and his dogmatic determination not to bend to the changes that time will always bring are an especially beautiful and poignant plot line for kids living in a world and news cycle with no off switch. He feels as if he has no control and desperately tries to exercise it over the few things he can. Him being unable to tell Nene he loved her hurt to watch as a child of divorce. Ricky's fear of new things and failure also really hits different in a show that was probably only greenlit to capitalize off of High School Musical nostalgia. Again, the writers wink at the audience that they know there are too many reboots in live actions and spin-offs, etc. Almost all of the characters are allowed a chance to shine in a similar way. They are human and they are flawed, and their main flaw isn't always that they feel everything should be handed to them, which is like a big problem I think writers have when they're writing people who are in Gen Z, like the whole like participation trophy complex, that I've never really met anyone who has that, and yet every writer who writes anyone under the age of 18 just is like obsessed with that idea, which is just like kids are naturally entitled because they don't really work for things that much. So it doesn't even make sense, but like, whatever, I'm off topic. Even if that is one of their personality problems, it comes from a more complex place. EJ comes from a place of privilege and has never had to work too hard for anything in his life. Because of this, it's difficult for him to understand boundaries and when to give up. He simply feels like everything he wants is already his for the taking, a lesson that he must unlearn after Nini breaks up with him for invading her privacy and like low-key committing biological warfare so she could get the lead at summer camp. Yes, he expects things when he wants them and how he wants them, but it's often because he thinks he knows best, and it's his fucked up way of trying to help. Gina Porter, played by Sophia Wiley, stands out especially. Sophia absolutely shines in this role. Despite being the youngest on the cast, she gives one of the most powerful performances, and her chemistry with Ricky made me jump out of my fucking seat in the homecoming episode. Her arc in the first season felt so natural. Even when she was scheming in the beginning, you could see that she wasn't some criminal mastermind, the way that TV shows often try to frame teenage girls with maybe a mean streak. She devises the idea for EJ to take her to homecoming to make Nini jealous. Their goal at the end is to make Nini and Ricky quit the show, but her plan has no middle. She just figures she'll wing it, which ends with her pouring a drink over EJ's head when he demands to know exactly what they're doing. Gina comes off less as a cookie-cutter mean girl and more as a girl who grew up watching Mean Girls and decided to adopt their personalities as a defense mechanism. She moves a lot, and as a result, she doesn't feel particularly at home anywhere she goes, refusing to date or make friends, and instead focuses on trying to be the best. This made it all the more heartwarming to see that despite her best efforts, her tribe of people continuously saw the good in her, forgave her, and welcomed her. Most of the time, that is. Also, I don't know where to fit them in, but Carlos and Seb, so cute. My choochies. The main criticism anyone has for them is that they're both stereotypical gay men in the sense that they're more feminine. This is so stupid, I can't even process it. Everyone is standing TikTok boys with dangly earrings and chokers and painted nails and Harry Styles with bell bottoms and crop tops on, and boys with bleached hair whose career is dancing on camera, but if an actually gay man does any of that, he's playing into stereotypes too much. Gay men dance and act and sing because those have been spaces that have been more accepting to them than the general public, historically. We know some gays are in the closet and make out in closets and play football. These ones don't. Oh well. Seeing how Carlos is bossy while simultaneously falling apart in any high-pressure situation is so cool. A gay character is allowed to have problems outside of being gay, the same way that everyone else in the cast is. Seb's not scared to be feminine in front of his family. He's afraid to disappoint them after they all came out to support him. When paired with Nini's moms making jokes about Birkenstocks and putting Ricky in their Salt Lake City Pride t-shirt when he sleeps over, this show treats gay people in such a natural way. Their plots are not over-dramatized or hypersexualized. They fit perfectly into the universe that they are presented in. I think a part of this is due to maybe having to keep it PG because it's on Disney streaming services. It makes me think that maybe shows like Riverdale and Glee are allowed too much freedom to be raunchy, especially in a show about teenagers, and use that sexuality as a crutch when plots are weak. So in this way, I think one of the criticisms that people have for it, that it doesn't know its tone or that it is too PG, is actually something that can help it sometimes. I'm a big proponent of diversifying TV shows. It doesn't hurt anyone, and all the plots hit the same, and some of them even hit harder when gay people and trans people and people of color are included. I'm also a big proponent of not using diversity as a crutch, just like nostalgia. Just because there's black people in it doesn't mean that it's good representation and not just like a commodification of black pain. Just because one of the main characters is gay doesn't mean it's all gay people's jobs to now write out in support of it, especially if the rep is bad or if everyone is white. Just because it's diverse doesn't make it good. You see this often when people are trying to get shows renewed, listing the different characters of color and sexual orientations in the plot, but never quite getting around to mentioning how much screen time they get, how they're actually treated, and like if the show is any fucking good. I don't want more black people in shitty shows. I want more black people in good ones. This show is both good and diverse, with Nini's plot running an interesting parallel to that of her immigrant great-grandfathers. Carlos asking Seb to the dance and then waiting for Seb at the dance are both insanely cute and heartbreaking in turn. Seb's gender presentation is not staunchly masculine and no one seems to mind. Ashlyn's entire plot isn't about her thinking she's fat and unlovable. In fact, she's one of the few characters with a season 1 endgame that makes any sense. These characters aren't othered the way they would be in other works, the way that I've seen them be. They're allowed the same room to joke and cry and be angry and have flaws. It's pretty cool and very refreshing and reminds me of being around people my own age and knowing there are less conventions than there might be if I was kicking it with some boomers. Not saying Gen Z is like perfectly politically correct, because that's an annoying sentiment a lot of older people seem to have too. And I'm like black and I have sense and eyes and ears and I know that that's not true, but still, little things. So yeah, that's it. Even the show's shortcomings are easily fixed. It's a great example of not judging a book by its cover or a show by its title. You can watch it on Disney Plus and probably some other shadier places too. Stream All I Want by Olivia Rodrigo. You've probably already heard it on TikTok anyways.
I say that I'm through, but this song is still for you. Now all I want is love that lasts, is all I want.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and please don't start a shipping war in the comments.